Hello, one and all. This is my view of Ascendance Bookworm, Part 5, Volume 3. And in my last video, I talked a lot about Detland, and how I felt like she was a victim in this story, one completely and utterly separate from Mother's schemes and machinations. I mean, does she suck? Abso-freaking-lutely, but that shouldn't be much of a surprise given her backstory. She's been completely and utterly ignored by her family for her entire life, and just when she finally met someone who actually liked her and wanted to be with her, she was told to marry a man a decade older than her, all so she could be the next Archduke. Except she was never going to be the next Archduke. She was a temporary replacement until Letizia came of age, and everybody knew that, but nobody freaking told her. Good lord, even her own retainers kept her in the dark. I mean, heck, her own father intentionally kept her as dumb and uneducated as possible to make sure she had no chance of keeping the throne and being a true Archduke. I mean, that is a tragic backstory, and I continue to feel bad for her for most of this volume. I mean, Detland was actually useful at restraining Frau Alarm and ensuring that mine and Raymond's reports got to Ferdinand. That was helpful. But then we get to the introductory tournament, and I'm not gonna lie, I had a very hard time defending her temper tantrum of demanding Ferdinand get her the talking Schumel. Though that said, I couldn't help but feel a bit bad when she was shocked, utterly and completely shocked, that Ferdinand could do something as mean as win someone's cape at a dinner match. Good lord, clearly Georgine has told her nothing about how cunning and powerful this man really is. I mean, heck, her own retainers still think that he's got a minuscule amount of mana as a result of his probably lower-class mother. Which is hilarious, as he is in fact the son of a princess, and has continuously trained his mana his entire life, making him almost certainly stronger than the actual freaking king. Good lord, Detland, you really are in the dark about literally everything. But anyway though, then she takes Raymond's place to receive his prize for his research, and while Mine is utterly disgusted by this, I really couldn't blame her too much. Raymond is kind of a shy guy, and I can't imagine he was super excited to be standing in front of a large crowd of people like that. Oh, hi everyone. I mean, I'm sure it took barely a word for him to be like, oh, you want to do it instead of me? Awesome, thank you so much. But then we get to the whirling ceremony, and good freaking lord above. I mean, Detland's outfit is something else. I mean, we see a bit in the color illustration, but there's an even better picture of it in the 5th fan book. And, yeah, my descriptions of being like a mountain, a lighthouse, and Marie Antoinette were all terrifyingly accurate. And while this is going on, her mother is expressionless, completely and utterly expressionist. She truly doesn't care what her daughter does, or how much she embarrasses herself. Seriously, Detland's outfit is so awful and gaudy that even her own dancer partner refuses to look directly at her, and only Ferdinand seemingly tried to talk her out of it. God, that is sad. And I genuinely felt bad for Detland in this moment, until the magic circle popped up and the church decided you will be the next Zentz. At that point, I started wondering, hey, Ferdinand, would you mind, just murdering her, like, immediately? I mean, I know she didn't actually activate the circle, so she's not a real Zent candidate, but the church doesn't know that, and they are freaking desperate to replace their false king. And others, especially those who lost in the Civil War, might be just as desperate and could join her side. And we saw, in this volume, it was said that Frau Alarm is basically forming a group full of the students who hate mine. So, yeah, that could be the start of Detland's army against her. Concerning. And while it might sound like an exaggeration, Ortwin was genuinely concerned that his sister was about to be executed as a member of the current royal family. So, yeah, right now Detland is insanely dangerous, and I am blown away that the royal family thought Ferdinand could control her. Though I do love that Ferdinand popped in literally 5 seconds later and said, I can't control her. Here is a recording of me failing to control her. So yeah, this is a problem. This is a really big freaking problem. While Detlin might have had a crummy upbringing and I might actually pitied her, I want her as far from power as humanly possible, especially since even just the possibility of power immediately went to her head with her punching / torturing Letizia for the king's decision to make her the next Archduke, and then deciding she'll marry one of the princes to punish their wives for being mean to her at a party once. Good freaking lord, that is the next level of petty. Oh, and as of her dear devoted husband Ferdinand, yeah, she'll just kick him out, but not before stealing his name. And while her retainers are utterly and absolutely disgusted by all of this, they fully believe the mindset that retainers' duty is to accommodate whoever they serve, even if their desires are utterly and completely selfish. And this line in the epilogue creates an interesting dichotomy of the prologue, where Mine's retainers blame themselves for letting her push herself so hard in the dinner match. I mean, they've learned from the failures of Mine's Knights 4 years ago, which put her in a coma, and know their job isn't just to obey Mine, but rather to protect her, especially from herself. And this really made me wonder, could Mine have grown up to be like Detland? I mean, it might sound crazy, but Mine is incredibly selfish when it comes to her reading time, especially when she was younger. I mean, the first year at the Royal Academy, she spent a lot of time in the library, meaning her knights had to spend a lot of time in the library guarding her, even though she could have just brought the books back to the dorm, or had her, knights go out and get the books and bring them back to the dorm. And she's maybe even more violent than Detland, as she's threatened to perform a bloody carnival multiple times against those who hurt her books, whereas Detland promised not to do a purge. Also, she's insanely rude. Just this volume alone, she straight up told the wife of a greater duchy, "You lost. Be silent as losers should be." She then pinned all the blame for the trouble she'd caused on the men of that duchy and the prince in front of her and the prince. And let's not forget, she ended this volume by telling a member of the royal family to her face, "I am astounded by the sheer stupidity of those the Zent surrounds himself with." Good freaking lord, Mine! I'm not even sure if Detland has ever been that rude. So yeah, while Mine might be infinitely smarter, who would she be if she didn't have her commoner family to teach her empathy, or Ferdinand to teach her dedication and noble etiquette? She could have very well turned out like Detland. Just something to keep you up at nights. Anyway though, the volume starts with Mine barely holding on to life, which is unsurprising since last volume she worked past the point of going colorblind. That is genuinely insane, and after retainers done blaming themselves, they turn their ire on Wilfried, who they claim showed far more concern for Hannelore than Mine, and wasn't even grateful for how hard Mine pushed herself to win that match. Again, to the point of literally struggling to breathe. And I do think it's important to point out that the only ones who really seem to feel this way are the Lice Gang retainers. And it's been obvious since year one they don't particularly like Wilfried, since back then they got crazy mad at him for ordering them to help him with his tea parties, despite those parties being Mine's responsibility and her telling them to help him. And I do think it's very possible to let a small preconceived notion really taint your opinion of someone. For example, in this volume when I found out that Wilfried signed a dinner contract, not only without telling Mine or Sylvester, but also apparently without even freaking reading it, I was livid. I was fully ready for Sylvester to just own him and for Bendo to lecture him for the next decade, except turns out it wasn't a contract, and Leslie was the idiot here. Not only for not realizing the contract couldn't be written on paper, but also for using up all his dorm's parchment on his paintings of Mine. So yeah, I was wrong about Wilfried, and it's entirely possible that the retainers are letting their own hatred get in the way. I mean, it's not like they're actually telling Wilfried how sick Mine really is. He probably thinks she's just a bit weak or something. He even said later on in this volume they didn't know she actually still needed magical tools to support herself. I mean, that said though, the hatred definitely goes both ways, as Oswald, Wilfried's head retainer, said back during year one that Mine failed to break in her Lice Gang retainers since she only had them for a month. Big red flag right there. And it was clear that he had a very different philosophy about things, preaching Veronica's philosophy that everyone in the duchy should work for the Archduke, and for Wilfried as the future Archduke, even though Florence had made it very clear that she wouldn't accept that mindset anymore. But despite that, Oswald still said this volume that Charlotte and Mine have a duty to offer Wilfried their successes, and that Mine not doing that was a sign that she'd teamed up with the Lice Gang faction to force Sylvester to do this massively excessive purge. It wasn't massive or excessive. Against his will to make mine Archduke, which is sounding a lot like Veronica's crazy conspiracy theory gibberish. But even dumber than all of that are the examples he gives, saying that mine should have let Wilfrid handle the illustration negotiations and trade credit for the divine protection ritual research, which just... No! God freaking no! Wilfrid tried handling negotiation, but was so desperate to get the illustrations that he tried giving up the secrets of the printing industry, Ehrenfest's literal future, and probably would have if he'd ever bothered learning how the industry actually freaking worked. And as for the research, I mean, seriously, dude, mine is the High Bishop. Mine is the Saint of Ehrenfest. Mine is actually performing the ritual, which was the cornerstone of the research. Every knight interviewed knows that mine was leading it. Heck, the king himself knew that mine was in charge. Wilfrid would have been justifiably laughed off the stage if he tried to take credit for that. And the worst part about all of this is that Wilfrid actually believes the madness and decides that mine isn't devoted enough to him and constantly disrespects him. Which just, seriously man, are you actually blaming your little sister for your own failures here? When have you ever actually done something worthy of your status as the future Archduke? I mean, mine spends most of her time not in school supporting Ehrenfest from the temple. She literally started the printing industry, inventing techniques, locating craftsmen, and has retainers collecting stories, which she buys with her own money. She actually spends her time socializing, gathering useful information, rather than just complaining about women, and defending your father from all the rumors being spread about him. She's formed strong connections with the top-ranked duchy, which got the chance to print and sell their history, and also has connections to freaking royalty. Heck, the leader of the Sovereign Knights is claiming that she and Ferdinand are working to start a civil war, and yet nobody, except Siggy, actually believes him because of how much mine has done for them. Mine might be the most qualified Archduke candidate in the entire world, and just, what have you done? Seriously, what is the single thing you've done to set yourself up as Archduke? What can you actually put on your resume? Wilfrid, you have never put the work into anything that doesn't interest you, and you yourself admitted just last volume to doing the absolute bare minimum at the academy, since being an honor student was so easy for you. I know mine is an impossible bar to compare yourself to, but at least put in the effort, rather than just taking the easy way out and blaming everyone around you. Good freaking lord, man, I was seriously rooting for you these last few volumes. Please don't tell me you're gonna turn yourself into a villain now. God above, Detland and Wilfrid teaming up would be a terrifying combo, and not an unexpected one. Seriously, Wilfrid only seems to see the best in Detland because she reminds him so much of his grandmother, which, yeah, there's a lot wrong with that. But anyway, the meat of this volume was the introductory tournament, and this is really the best view we've ever gotten of it. I mean, the socializing, the research, the ditter, the whirling, the awards. Every year before now, it's been interrupted in one form or another, but now we get to see it, and it is freaking awesome. First off, I love the Ditter tournament actually focused on summoning up weird and strange Fae beasts the audience had never seen before. That really makes the game more interesting as it tests how much the students have researched and how well they can execute unusual battle formations to take them down. I mean, this really gave Leonore a chance to show off her knowledge, and just good for her, thank God. That said, the system is still a bit flawed, as Klassenberg end up fighting a really easy Fae beast, which makes their second place win a bit tainted in my book. I'm not saying they aren't skilled and didn't deserve it, I'd just rather they fought, for it and actually earned a more deserved second or even third place. That said, thanks to Leonore and all the training they've received, Ehrenfest wins third place, the highest they've ever ranked. Even better than they did when Ferdinand was at the academy, though that shouldn't be too much surprise, given that Ferdinand focused on having fun and causing chaos more than actually winning. But anyway, though, good for Ehrenfest. What makes this really so moving was that while some did accuse Ehrenfest of getting lucky or cheating, far more stepped up to their offense, acknowledging how hard they must have worked to reach that level of skill and coordination, and I was so overwhelmingly happy in that moment that mine didn't bless them. They weren't magically juiced up by the saint. No, they earned their third place. And I was genuinely tearing up in this moment. Now they are finally being acknowledged. Beautiful. Anyway though, as for socializing, oh, that was fun, as rather than dealing with the Ditter-obsessed Archduke of the Ditter Duchy, they instead dealt with his lovely wife Sieglind, and I freaking love this woman. I mean, she is a terrifying presence who was easily able to push back Sylvester for like 10 minutes, genuinely fought for her children, was proud of her daughter standing up to her, punished her son brutally for his mistakes, and just as it seemed like Ehrenfest had the upper hand, she reminded them that mine did kind of break a priceless artifact during the dinner match and got Sylvester to back off. Good lord, she is honestly the best example we've seen in this series of a true first wife, and I genuinely don't know how the Ditter Duchy ever managed to function with a first wife from a different duchy. I'm also incredibly curious how different mine would have turned out if this was her noble mother rather than Florentia and Elvira. I mean, I think there's a very good chance she might have genuinely overthrown the royal family in her first year at the academy. Amazing. Also, I gotta love Sylvester spending his entire meeting kicking mine repeatedly to shut her up before giving in, dropping the leash, and letting the little gremlin go nuts. But I don't think even he was expecting her to say, "You lost, be silent as losers should be," because that's insane. Not only because it is an incredibly rude thing to say to a greater duchy, but because mine was as clear as possible. She didn't bother hiding it in some weird BS noble euphemism like, "Oh, you're like Liedenschafter," when Fräulein said Hotte. No, she was brutal and clear, and immediately regretted it when she realized that Sieglind genuinely believed that mine and Leslie were in love and wanted to be together, since he lied a lot in his reports and somehow convinced his parents, dorm supervisor, and everyone playing that it was bride-taking dinner, which is played when a family doesn't want to let their daughter marry someone, rather than bride-stealing dinner, which sounds like kidnapping a person and using violence to force them to marry you, which is, let's say, problematic. And this is all Leslie's fault, very clearly, and Sieglind is planning on punishing him harshly, but because Hannelore doesn't want to marry into Ehrenfest and inconvenience them any more than they already have, every single person in the duchy is going to view Hannelore as a traitor, and she's basically got no future, which is just so utterly heartbreaking, especially since she ended up lying to mine and saying, "Oh yeah, everything is fine." Oh, good Hannelore, you are too good for this world and way too good for Wilfried. We then get Detland and Ferdinand showing up, and just good lord above. Ferdinand returning Heischitz's cape is just so brutal, as he clearly emphasizes to him that, it's because of you that I'm now engaged to Veronica's granddaughter. Something this man clearly didn't think through until this exact moment, and Ferdinand is even cold enough to drop the line, "Be as ecstatic as you were over my engagement." Savage, absolutely savage. I mean, then Anastasia shows up, and after mine insults both him and the Ditter Duchy, she fully disobeys Sylvester and drops a bombshell for Matthias. The knights who attacked them were probably drugged with trug, which, I mean, despite Sylvester's complaints, was absolutely the right move to make. If the Sovereign Knights, and probably their leader, are compromised, then the only people they can actually rely on are the Ditter Duchy, and specifically the first wife who actually runs things. I mean, Sylvester even spilled the beans that Georgine was probably behind it. Which leads to a rather amusing awkward silence for everyone, and I'm sure Sieglind was kind of regretting the role she played in Ferdinand's engagement right there. I mean, seriously, her knights promised her so much for Ferdinand getting engaged. Like, "Oh, if Ferdinand marries Erdensbach, we'll get this, we'll get this, we'll get this." And she's like, "Yeah, we're not getting anything. In fact, we might have just made an enemy out of Ehrenfest. So, yeah, that's a problem right there." Beautiful. We also finally get to meet the Archduke of Frenbeltag, Florentia's brother and the husband of Sylvester's sister, and it's made very clear this is a smart and crafty Archduke, which is fascinating since the epilogue revealed that he is the son of a third wife who took the throne after the first two wives were killed in the post-war purge, meaning he was probably not given a true Archduke training at home since nobody ever thought he'd actually be Archduke. I can imagine a conversation like, "You, Archduke? Do you have any idea how many people would have to die for you to become the next Archduke?" Well, now you know. I feel like this also applies to Florentia as well. I mean, I see a lot of people online hate on her because she is an incompetent first wife, but as the child of a third wife, being a first wife probably would have been impossible for her, so of course she wasn't prepared for that. And I do think these circumstances explain a lot about how these couples ended up together. I mean, Frenbeltag was a greater duchy, so marrying it with Ehrenfest, which was at the bottom of the rankings before the war, would have been very unlikely. But if we're talking about third wives' kids, then yeah, it makes a lot more sense. I mean, Constance certainly married up into Frankenberg, but she was going to become, she was going from an archduke candidate to an archnoble, so, not too much of a change. Whereas Florentia marrying Ehrenfest would have certainly been a downgrade for her, but becoming the first wife would have probably made it worthwhile in her family's eyes. Plus, at this point in time, Ferdinand is probably at the academy, so Ehrenfest's ranking is probably a bit higher than it usually was, which made the marriage seem more reasonable. Oh, and speaking of Florentia, she's pregnant, and while she is very, very sick as a result, she managed to hide that perfectly during the graduation ceremony, like a true noble woman. Good for her. I think this also explains why she passed out when she read Mine's report in the last volume. No, Mine's words weren't just that shocking to her. She was already kind of weak from being pregnant. Anyway, though, then in terms of research, Ehrenfest manages to rank both first and third with their joint research. Their research into divine protections is hugely groundbreaking, so of course came in first. Though Ganondorf was way more interested in Mine's graphs, which are a brand new phenomenon, and I'm very excited to see how people implement them in the, next introductory tournaments. And Ehrenfest gets third thanks to their work with Raymond, which includes the sound replaying device he made with Mine, which Mine stuck inside a stuffed Schumel to give it an Ehrenfest touch. And just to really emphasize things, she had Lorenz fill it with romantic lines that Muriella picked out from Royal Academy love stories. With the words being so enchanting, Lorati triggered it again and again and again until she triggered the last message. An advertisement for Ehrenfest's books, which sounds so much like an infomercial, and made things just a bit awkward for Frau Alarm as she was claiming full credit for Arnsbeck, and that made her look like a liar, which she is. She's also crazy, as she blames Mine for tricking her sister's husband, good old Count Toad, into trying to kidnap her, despite Mine only being like 8 at the time. So yeah, that don't make a lick of sense, but like I said, she's crazy, and viewed this ad as a direct attack on her, as Mine intentionally tried to make her look like an idiot. And Detlinda ended up having a rather similar reaction, much to Ferdinand's absolute and complete delight, as he gave the little gremlin a head pat and told her good job for only the third time ever in the near decade he's known her. Beautiful, absolutely freaking beautiful. But anyway, though, then it's time for the awards ceremony, and there's something really interesting here about Sylvester seemingly feeling so bad about keeping Mine from experiencing this before, which made me wonder if he too really valued that time he got to spend with his father and brother at the Royal Academy whenever Ferdinand came in first. And while Mine initially dismisses his concerns, she definitely gets emotional, even optimistic, when she actually walks on the stage and just sees everyone applauding her and praising her. I mean, I can certainly relate. I had absolutely no interest in my own college graduation and genuinely wanted to skip it. I mean, the day itself was absolutely miserable with 90-degree weather and a commencement speaker who just wouldn't shut up no matter how many times we screamed death threats at her. I mean, seriously, she was supposed to give a 9-minute speech and she spoke for 40 freaking minutes in 90-degree weather. Yeah, she deserved death for that. But then when it finally came time for me to walk across the stage, I couldn't help but smile. I mean, I just was so enraptured by the whole experience of it all that I didn't even hear my family's air horns, or the people who cursed out my family for using air horns. Fun day. Though I did get heat stroke after that. Anyway, though, mine came first, not only for a year, but also for the Archduke and Scholar course, while Brunhilde was an honor student for the first time ever, probably because, now she's not constantly being docked points for mine regularly passing out. And Matthias earned that same honor and was so grateful that he pressed his hand against her forehead in public and said, "You have my honor and my complete and utter gratitude." Good Lord, man. It takes a lot to embarrass mine, but you did it. Congrats. Then it's time to welcome Ferdinand to the Ehrenfest Tea Party room, and he's just so genuinely stunned when Mine says welcome home, and I just seriously wanted to cry. No doubt he never expected to hear those words again, though now I think about it, this might have been the first time anyone has ever said welcome home to him. God, that's sad. Anyway, though, speaking of sad, Instead of praising Mine, he's more focused on apologizing for Detland stealing his stuffed Schumel, which just feels like what his life is now, apologizing for Detland again and again and again. So instead, Mine's retainers have him work with Mine to replace it, and they just have so much fun brewing together. It is so adorable. And because Ferdinand is Ferdinand, he triple stacks his time-saving magic circle, which is beyond insane and reaches the realm of just literally impossible. And because Mine is Mine, she asks him to make 4, and then charges him for using the schematics 4 times. Good lord above, that's brutal. And overall, Ferdinand is just happy and comfortable being back home. Mine had all his favorite foods made, brought his custom order bench, and it's so comfortable that he actually struggles to wake up the next morning. And he's just so genuinely grateful. His thank you was so sincere that it actually brings tears to Riarda's eyes. Good freaking lord, I love this woman. I mean, seriously, she is probably closest Ferdinand ever came to having an actual mother. God, that's sad. Anyway, though, the Detland makes a fool of herself, and Mine and Ferdinand called in to explain why she's not actually a Zen candidate, and Ferdinand seems to know a lot about the actual process of getting the Magic Bible, and while he's not as outwardly as rude as Mine, just make it very clear the royal family would be utterly and completely incapable of reading the Bible, since it was written a crazy long time ago, and they suck at studying. And then we get the epilogue. I've already talked about Detland a bit, but it really is just telling how jealous her retainers are they get to spend time away from her. Good lord. Anyway, though, the main retainer we see here is Martina. And you know, I did feel bad for her a bit as she's clearly suffering under Detland, and she talks about how she sympathizes with her sister, Aurelia, for looking scary but being so timid. Except she then rants about Aurelia is useless as a spy. Girl, you just spent a full page talking about how awful her life was back in Arnsbeck. Why would you think she's your spy? Why would you think she's in any way loyal to you? Thankfully, despite your belief that looks and ranks are all that matters to guys, Aurelia actually married for love and is way happier as far away from you and your family as humanly possible. Though I do find it hilarious that she praised the other girl for being a great spy when there is a 99% chance that she's already been purged by this point and they just haven't told Martina yet. Beautiful. I'm excited. I'm very excited to see that moment. But anyway, though, then Detland demands that Ferdinand offer up his name to her, and Ferdinand says 2 things to this. 1, he doesn't have a name to give, and 2, Veronica sought his name before. But the novel explicitly states that she didn't get it, which should be bloody obvious since she would have killed him if she did. But because Detland's posse are severely underestimating him, they don't notice his deception, which brings us back to point 1. Does Ferdinand actually have a name? I mean, maybe. It'd be weird if he, lied about the first part but then told the truth about the second part, and honestly, giving his name to Sylvester before he left would have made a lot of sense, or even giving it to him while they were drinking the night away in the tea party room, because, I mean, Sylvester is pretty safe as an Archduke. Alternatively, he could have just, left his name in his house / Mine's library behind some rock-solid defensive seals. I think he actually asked Mine not to mess with his room. So, yeah, I don't think it's ever actually said that a name needs to belong to someone. It could potentially just be, stored away like a Horcrux. That could make some sense. Anyway, though, then we get the Roddy chapter, and, this girl pops up so much that I am genuinely thinking that she is going to marry Lawrence, especially since she wants to get into Ehrenfest for its books, and was completely enchanted by him reading love storylines through the Schumel. It's also been stated that those who gave their names will struggle to marry, as they are still the children of criminals, so Lorade could be a good pick since she's desperate and likes his voice. She also got the god Sprouts on her side, so love is certainly possible for her. Also this chapter, she and Muriella become utterly and completely convinced that Mine and Ferdinand, despite the massive age difference, are madly in love. So much so they are bold enough to flirt just feet away from their respective fiancés, which is honestly hilarious and is motivating enough that Lorade decides to write a book about Mine's love life, which is also hilarious since Mine cheered her becoming an author. But I have a feeling that Mine's gonna regret that very, very soon. That said, though, Mine probably won't understand the book anyway, and it's to be written under the guise of the Goddess of Wisdom, except the chapter ends with the revelation that by the time the book gets published, Mine will be known far and wide as the divine avatar of Mestionora, which, concerning, but not at all surprising. God above. Then we end with Oswald trying to stir up trouble and convince Wilfrid that everyone's conspiring against him, and this would be easy enough for Wilfrid to dismiss if Ortwin didn't say the exact same thing, which seriously, man, why? Are you actually trying to start a civil war in Aaronvast? Do you think that sabotaging mine will let you take first in class? What's your problem? I mean, I get it. You're competing against like 20 different Archduke candidates in your duchy, so there's a different mindset about these things, but just stay in your own lane, brother. Oh, and if all that wasn't bad enough, Barthold, Wilfried's new retainer, who was a bully and a Veronica fanatic, broke up the fight between Wilfried and Oswald, with Wilfried talking about how much he liked him, which, oh boy, yeah, like I said, Wilfried really does feel like he's being set up to be a villain here, and I am very concerned about all of that. Alright, a few things I want to mention. First off, Hartmut got permission to marry Clarissa because her parents were just genuinely concerned about what she'd do if they said no, which... yeah, smart parents. I honestly can't wait for Clarissa to move to Aaronvest. That's going to be amazing. Sylvester rejects moving up in the ranks because he can't handle being a top-ranked duchy for quite a while. And while I do understand that decision, I mean, just come on, man. Your duchy just revolutionized how people use mana, offered up a huge helping amount to royals, and scored crazy high in both Ditter and the science tournaments. I mean, I just want to know how high you'd rank after that. You've got the connections to royalty after donations. I think you could have easily surpassed Arnsbeck and made Georgine and Detland cry. Now that would have been fun. But also like the compromise. From now on, they'll be considered winners of the Civil War. That'll help them in every ranking moving forward, even after mine graduates. Good move. Even Anastasius thought it was a great idea. And those are my thoughts on this volume. Sorry this video was insanely long, but this was a great volume, and I had a lot to say about it. I can't wait for the next one to come out. That said, though, when it does come out, the video will probably be delayed a little bit. I have stuff going on around that time, so, you know, I'll get to it as soon as I can. Can't wait for it. Please let me think down below. Do you think they're setting up Wilfried to be a villain? Because it really does feel like he's going to team up with Detland, try and take over the country to show that he is a true Archduke candidate, which... yeah, that would annoy me. That would very, very much annoy me, but also make perfect sense with his character. What's going to happen with Ferdinand? Does he actually have a name? Who actually has his name? If not Veronica, and maybe not himself, Sylvester is back in his house. Where exactly is it? And what's going to happen now that Detland is seemingly viewed as a true Zent candidate? I mean, even Ferdinand popped in and said, no, she's not actually a real candidate. It was said in this volume that nobody in the Arnsbeck dormitory really paid attention to him, so... concerning. Very, very concerning. But please, everything down below. And until next time, peace!